welcome everybody back to the NWA Power Review on the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. I am your host, Adam Cousins, and unfortunately this week, those of you watching on YouTube, you will be able to see. Those of you that are listening on Spotify, you will soon be able to hear that we are not joined this week by my NWA queen, my NWA ride or die, Miss Fiona Loughran. Unfortunately, Fiona is still suffering with coronavirus, or realistically what it is she's still crying because Scotland got eliminated from the European Championships a few days ago. European football / soccer championships, depending on where you're from in the world and how you recognize the term football. But no, in all seriousness, Fee, we wish you well, and we hope that you're back next week to join us for the real part of the Crockett Cup. Nevertheless, some news before we get into Power, and some really good news for the NWA. Colby Corino has re-signed with the NWA. That is huge news. I love Colby Corino. I think he's a fantastic competitor. He's one of the top stars, definitely in the NWA. Him re-signing for the company is massive. For those of you that don't know, his father was former ECW legend Steve Corino, who is now down in the WWE Performance Center, training the next generation of talent. But that signing for NWA, or the re-signing, shall we say, of Colby Corino is huge for the NWA. So massive congratulations on that signing. Now let's get on to Power. This week was another week of the Crockett Cups. We are in quarterfinal stages. Some exciting matches this week. In fact, I messaged Fiona after I watched Power this week, and I said to her, this was probably one of, if not the best episode of NWA Power that I have seen since I started watching it a few years ago. I thought bell to bell, this was fantastic. The matches were great. There are some really great matches on this. Everything was just perfect this week on Power. I really do mean that. I thought it was a really strong episode of NWA. We're going to get into it now. Now, as usual, NWA, when it opens up, it does that cold open. And recently, that cold open has changed a little bit. And it's not been a lot of talking from Joe Garley or Carl Davis. It's been talking from the competitors. And this week, yeah, the man himself, who's actually been on the channel quite recently, you can go and check his interview out. Aaron Stevens started what was a powerful promo. And basically, it was all the quarterfinalists that were looking to secure their spots in the semi-final. And Aaron was basically saying how confident he was that blunt force trauma would be one of those, not only one of them that would get through to the semi-finals, but one of the team that would be winning the Crockett Cup. Now, to get to the semi-finals, they have an unenviable task in the main event of the miserably faithful Max the Impaler and Judas, which was very interesting, to say the least, and we'll get into that in a minute. Also on tap for NWA this week, Joe Alonso was supposed to be defending the title against Alex Taylor. Now, for those of you that remembered last week with the Southern Six, Alex Taylor, Philbilly Silas Mason was not medically cleared to compete, and thus Southern Six used kind of a freebird rule where Kerry Morton selected Alex Taylor to compete with them against the Country Gentlemen, which they allowed and picked up the victory. But because Alex Taylor was involved in that match, he was removed from the title match against Joe Alonso, and he would have a mystery opponent. We'll find out who that is very soon indeed. Now, the opening contest to this was Looks That Kill, Brian Idol and Natalia Markova versus Knox and Murdoch, last year's champions of the Crockett Cup, or the Crockett Cup holders. It was quite interesting that Knox and Murdoch together on this. Billy Corgan was on commentary as well, and he would mention that the team that requested the entry into the tournament personally, which was quite interesting. And they also would mention Knox and Murdoch's displeasure about being the number 4 seed, but winning last year's tournament. Obviously, number 1 seed going to Blunt Force Trauma, the tag team champions. With this match, and what I would say about it, and it was quite interesting, that there was a lot of it that Markova was trying to use her speed, her quickness involved in that to try and get away from the heavy hitters. There was times where, in this, where they went to when Knox meant to hit Mark over and she was, and sorry, Murdoch was meant to hit Mark over and she was sort of screaming and Knox was like, no, no, no. And she would hit Murdoch again. And he was getting more and more wound up. And then he did eventually hit Mark over in this and literally just floored her. She would eventually tag in Brian Idol and he done a brilliant spike DDT. At this point was on Mike Knox. That would kind of keep him in the match because obviously the match was really dominated by Knox and Murdoch, although Markova would be using her quickness to try and get away. There was a lot of offense from both teams. And then when Markova got re-tagged in, she was laying it in thick on Trevor Murdoch and Mike Knox. There were some brilliant kicks there. But coming to the end of this match, there was wow. Markova would be in the ring. Mike Knox literally decapitates her with a high cross body, literally knocking her like out of the ring. I'm probably still picking her up off the mat, to be quite fair with her. It was devastating. And eventually they would hit the high-low on Brian Idol to pick up the victory and to go on to the semi-finals where they'll take on the Southern Six. And they did. And actually, they made a great replay of that because they had a quick interview with Carl Davis at the end. And they literally said, the last time we saw you boys, we were bouncing your faces off a steel cage, which is actually true. They had the steel cage match, which Knox and Murdoch won, but they will take on the Southern Six next week in the semi-finals of the Crockett Cup to see who goes on for the final. That is going to be a rekindlement of an old feud, which is good. The NWA have done that really, really well. They've put them together in the semi-finals. And then the winners, obviously, are going to be going against the other side of that group, which we'll get into very, very shortly, which contains blunt force trauma, of course. Now you will remember earlier on that I did say that Joe Alonso would be going against a mystery opponent because obviously Alex Taylor was part of the Southern Six in the Crockett Cup, and he was taking on someone that's made appearances in GCW, Ring of Honor, and AEW, and that's the name of Jack Cartwheel. This was absolutely brilliant. This match was all shades of awesomeness. Joe Alonso is definitely one of the stars in NWA. Jack Cartwheel was taking after his name. But there was, however, one scary moment where Joe Alonso threw Cartwheel into the ropes and his neck hit the ropes and snapped back. It looked awful at this point, and he went onto the outside. Jared Fritz was checking on him. Funny enough, with Joe Alonso, he was trying to count them both out at the same time, which was absolutely crazy. Fortunately enough, Jack Cartwheel was okay. He continued this match and he got some high flying specials in this, high flying moves. He done cartwheels off the top rope. It was so good. He nearly ended up beating Jack Cartwheel. Joe Alonso for the title in this match. But eventually Alonso would hit the Joey special, which is basically a skull crushing finale, for those of you that are wondering what that is, and gets the 3 count and retains the title. But I tell you what, and I tweeted this out after I'd watched Powerr, and I said, "Excuse me, Billy, NWA, more Jack Cartwheel, please." He was absolutely sensational. It was one of the best matches in the NWA that I've seen since I've personally started watching it. I can't obviously comment on the stuff that I've not seen before, but of the stuff that I've started watching, that match is definitely up there with one of the best that I've personally seen. So kudos to both of those. I do hope actually that Jack Cartwheel is okay after that bump. If you haven't seen the bump, watch it on the CW app in the States, or get yourself a VPN over here in the UK and watch some of that stuff on NWA. It was a brilliant encounter. And I can't wait actually to see hopefully some more of Jack Cartwheel. Hopefully he'll be back in the NWA very, very soon. We got to the main event actually. There's obviously, as of Powerr, there's only 3 matches on the card. Blunt Force Trauma, the NWA Tag Team Champions, would go against the Miserably Faithful, led by James Mitchell, and it includes the unified television champion, the non-binary nightmare, Max the Impaler, and the big 7-foot Judas. What I did like about this on commentary is they've done a great job of telling the story of how both tag teams have risen the ranks with experienced managers like Aaron Stevens for Blunt Force Trauma and Father James Mitchell from the Miserably Faithful. And there was so much. There was like Max and Carnage was literally creating carnage in the ring, and Damage and Judas would battle on the outside. There was not, this match was by far not a technical showpiece whatsoever, but really a big fight between four people, which was brilliant. Max would actually display dominance throughout this match and actually gave their team a shot of a win. Well, it was quite surprising, but Max the Impaler just doesn't care. The non-binary nightmare literally went toe to toe with Carnage and Damage of Blunt Force Trauma. Obviously, the managers were jaw-jacking back and forth during this. Of course, they would. You know, there was never going to not happen when you had James Mitchell and Aaron Stevens. But with that being said, the distraction would lead Max the Impaler to start chasing Aaron Stevens out the arena and leaving Judas on his own against both members of Blunt Force Trauma. And that in turn would again, the Blunt Force Trauma would gain their victory in this match. And they will go against the Immortals in the semi-finals next week. So we've got the Immortals versus Blunt Force Trauma. We have obviously the Southern Six versus Knox and Murdoch next week as well, and another match to be announced. And funnily enough, after this, Aaron Stevens did get on the mic and said, "You have witnessed the greatest tag team to ever wrestle in Texas. Call your daddy, call your mama. The Crockett Cup is coming home with Force Trauma." I did manage to do it, not as good as Aaron Stevens, but it was always going to be a quick review of the NWA without the NWA Ride or Die Miss Fiona Loughran, but that was it for the NWA. Of such a strong episode this week. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Over in the UK, get yourselves a VPN and watch it on the CW app. Or those of you in America, get the CW app. It's free, and you can watch NWA every single week. For sure. We have got some NWA Talking Territories interviews coming out as well this week. So keep an eye peeled on that. Keep your eyes also peeled for an interview with British cruiserweight superstar Robbie X, the king of the cruiserweights. And of course, we will be back with all the review shows. We've got Raw, we've got AEW, we've got SmackDown. We have got Forbidden Door this week as well. But more important than all that, we'll be back next week with some more NWA Powerr review with the semi-finals of the Crockett Cup. And I will be once again reunited with Miss Fiona Loughran. But until then, everybody, don't forget about the NWA on the CW app. And buckle down and stay safe.